Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel, Tournament Takes. I kind of wanted to break down the Week 10 slate and kind of go back and look at what we did right, look at what we did wrong, and kind of get some analysis on where we kind of went wrong on the slate, kind of pick up on some things we could have done different. A key part of being better daily fantasy player is going back and kind of seeing what others did, kind of seeing how you can adjust your process to kind of get a little bit better result. So let's get into it. I'm going to pull up the Millie Maker first and kind of look at the top lineup. We see that they had Kyler Murray, which was 18% owned. We had Kamara at 13%, Jacobs at 4.5%, who went off for a great game. They had Deontay Johnson, again, low ownership. Hopkins was the chalk, but like I said, he may come in a little under owned because he was expensive at 16%. Cole Beasley, who I was on heavy this past weekend, at 4.5%, and then you have Logan Thomas at 3%, Josh Reynolds, whose ownership I thought was coming up during the week last week, so I'm kind of surprised to see it was at 10%, which in my opinion I thought it's a little higher than where I was anticipating it coming in. So let's get into it. I'll kind of show you guys what I did. I ran out 8 lineups this past week. My worst lineup, let's start there. Okay. I had Kyler Murray, Miles Sanders, Gibson, Kirk, Tim Patrick, Cole Beasley, Evan Ingram, James Conner in Washington football team. So this past weekend, I was really heavy on the Washington football team, the defense. They only got 1 sack, and Matt Stafford was actually really efficient in this game, something that I wasn't expecting without Galladay on the field. Marvin Jones did catch a couple touchdowns. He had a really nice day. I was light on James Conner. This is the only lineup I actually had with James Conner this past week. It's surprising to me that Pittsburgh put up 36 points and Cincinnati only put up 10, and James Conner didn't get, more rushing yards. I'm really surprised at that. So it's kind of something to keep an eye on going forward. I mean, James Conner has a good matchup coming up this week. Coming up this week. So, that may depress, this past outing may depress his ownership a little bit more. Evan Ingram, 16%. A lot of the tight ends did not come through. I was a lot heavier on Evan Ingram this past week as well. He only had, 3 targets for 15 yards. We had Wayne Gallman, who actually went off in that game. He got a lot of the passing work. He got the touchdowns. Daniel Jones rushed for a couple in. So that's kind of something that I overlooked. Like I mentioned in my last video, I want, the quarterbacks who are going to be throwing it in the end zone. I completely overlooked Daniel Jones' rushing upside. I mean, we did see a couple weeks ago on Monday Night Football, he tripped over himself, but he had a big run, some 80-yard, whatever run for almost a touchdown. But that's kind of something I overlooked. So looking back at it, maybe this taking almost 100% Ingram was not the best move. Cole Beasley was someone I was really high on the entire week. I think I got him in most of my lineups. I'm really surprised at that 4.5% ownership. Like I was saying, Arizona's beatable in the slot. So I'm kind of surprised to see that, he was only 4.5% on the Millie Maker. Tim Patrick got ejected from the game. I don't know exactly what he did. I wasn't watching this game. I think he punched somebody or whatever the situation was, but he ended up getting ejected, 2% owned. I think it was like the middle of the 4th quarter. So he could have potentially got to the 100-yard mark. So I'm kind of okay with that logic there. I did go a lot lighter on Kirk on this game. Kyler Murray, even though he has a really high rushing floor, he is taking deep shots, but not as much as the other quarterbacks. So it might surprise you, but he's only taking like 4 to 5 deep shots a game, and some of the other ones are taking like 6, 7, 8. Some of the other quarterbacks. So that's kind of why I kind of backed off of Kirk a little bit. Antonio Gibson was my lock play. He was someone that I played in most all of my lineups. And, I kind of lucked out because this game I was looking at them playing from ahead. And, the game script wasn't really in my favor the entire time. So the lesson I learned with that one is you will kind of want to spread out your exposure. Maybe if they're both in a good spot, Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic, maybe take a 50-50 kind of share or maybe a little heavier on Gibson if I like that narrative, that game script that they're going to be playing from ahead. But I really lucked out because in the 4th quarter he had a 2-yard touchdown and a 5-yard touchdown, and without those, this would have busted my entire lineup. So that's really something I'm fortunate about, was that this kind of worked out in my favor. Miles Sanders, I kind of stick by the play. He had the rushing work. You know, you had Boston Scott who had like a 56-yard touchdown. Miles Sanders got a pass all the way down to the 1 yard line, and then Corey Clement stole a touchdown. So I feel like in this scenario, 10 out of 10 times I'm probably gonna go back to Miles Sanders. I mean, I felt like the play was right, the logic was right. It just didn't work out in my favor. Boston Scott breaking that big run, I thought it would be Miles Sanders. The 1 yard touchdown, Corey Clement coming in and just getting that 1 yard rushing touchdown didn't make any sense to me. I guess because Miles Sanders was coming back from injury, maybe they didn't want him to get all that contact in the end zone, something that I'm kind of thinking about. So, overall, this lineup did not do well. This was the only lineup out of all my lineups that didn't cash this past weekend. So, and this was one of the last kind of pivots that I made is because I kind of saw James Conner a little late. I kind of got onto that Cincinnati-Pittsburgh game a little late. I did like T. Higgins in that game. He actually had a really, really great weekend, but it didn't work out. He didn't make it into my lineups. The second lineup I had was the kind of the same core. I had Hopkins in most of my lineups. I did play a lot of Mike Davis. I did want to pivot to Josh Reynolds. I just wasn't able to stomach fading a 40% Mike Davis fade. And that's kind of, something that you really got to realize is that when you're playing tournaments, fading someone who's going to be 40% owned gives you huge leverage. We look at a lot of the top players who finished. They actually did the pivot that I was thinking about is fading the Mike Davis chalk at 40% and playing 3,500 Josh Reynolds. And Josh Reynolds actually had a great game. So this was the second lineup. This did all right. Third lineup, I went heavier on Lockett. There was a couple throws that Russell Wilson just missed him in the end zone. There was like a 50-yard almost touchdown to Tyler Lockett that kind of didn't connect. So I feel like the play was correct, but I just in this spot I probably would go back to Lockett again. Other than that, Mike Davis in this lineup. I did manage to get Josh Reynolds in this lineup. Again, Evan Ingram did not do well for me. The next lineup, I told you guys I did like Antonio Brown, so I did want to play him, and I did want to play him with Mike Davis. Again, Evan Ingram in this lineup. The Washington football team is kind of actually where my main hang-up was. They were 3.5% owned. The Saints were really highly owned, so I had some Saints in my top lineups, Saints defense. But the main thing is that I think the game script that I projected for Washington being ahead was completely wrong. I really lucked out on that play. Also on the DeAndre Hopkins play, I mean, I knew that he was going to get the work. He had 7 receptions for over 100 yards. The last reception that he got kind of broke the slate, right? It was like a 45-yard bomb with time expiring to DeAndre Hopkins, him jumping up and getting that jump ball. So I think that was kind of also a little bit of lucky that we kind of got bailed out there with the Kyler and Hopkins. But that's the reason why you're playing DeAndre Hopkins. You want players who have that type of upside. He could have done that at any point in the game. If he gets loose, goes for a 40, 50-yard touchdown, that's the kind of upside you're paying, 7,700 for. In my opinion, I think he was a little cheaper than he should have been on this slate. I mean, maybe I'm alone in that thinking, but I feel like at 7,700, if he was like 8,500, I would have thought about it a little bit more, but at 7,700, I really wanted him in my lineups. Again, Antonio Gibson in the course. Next lineup, I kind of had Gronk. Like I told you guys, again, I wanted Gronk. I think Gronk was probably the highest scoring tight end of the slate. I wish I actually had more of him because I did have quite a bit of Mike Davis, so I should have played a little more Gronk, but I just couldn't get off of Evan Ingram and Miles Sanders. And that's kind of what brought my lineups down was those two games. If you remember me saying in the last video, they weren't locks for me, but they ended up turning into locks because I was just so high on Miles Sanders going into the week. So that's something that I want to take away from this week is that maybe spread out your exposure a little bit. Maybe play some cheaper contests with more lineups. The funny thing is as the lineups progress, aside from the 124 score, as the lineups progress was when I started creating more and more lineups. And these are all hand-built lineups. I'm not using an optimizer. I'm using some projections, but for the most part, I'm going with the price that I see, if I'm seeing value in that price, and then I'm determining, okay, if they're going to be able to crush that price tag or not. So in this scenario, I had Kirk in this. I think this was the second or third lineup with Kirk in it. But the Washington kind of defense kind of really brought me down. If you look at the next 3 lineups, all of these have the Saints defense in them. So I have Saints defense here. Again, Evan Ingram in this spot, Tyler Lockett. This would have been a nice play here if I had the money to kind of spend a little bit more. Instead of Ingram, stuff Gronk in, this would have given me like a 17 some odd lineups. I think that was my highest scoring lineup of the day, was the one with Gronk. But kind of same core, DeAndre Hopkins, Beasley. Beasley was my number one target this week. I know a lot of people were going to be on John Brown. A lot of people were going to be on Diggs. I really wish that I had actually done a double stack with Josh Allen. It was something that I had in my lineups that were preloaded, that I had actually put as savers, but I didn't end up getting to it. And I think the reason for that was I just wanted Tyler Lockett, and I did want Miles Sanders. So I was playing 3 running backs with the Mike Davis chalk. The second best lineup that I had Lockett in it as well, but I had Diggs. I didn't have Beasley in this one. I had Josh Reynolds, I had the Saints defense, I had Gronk and the Mike Davis correlation. So something like this is that instead of playing Lockett here, $1,000 more would have went in, and I could have gotten Diggs, and I could have probably saved maybe $1,000. This would have been hard to do, right? It would have been hard to kind of save that $1,000. It's probably going to get someone like Logan Thomas. I think Logan Thomas was like 3,300. And then, I just didn't want Antonio Gibson and Logan Thomas both in that game. So, something like that I think would have worked really, really well in this scenario. And then the best lineup that I had Miles Sanders in it again. It had Lockett, it had Ingram, but I had Beasley in this lineup. I had Josh Reynolds. And this was one of the lineups similar to what I created on the show, or on my last video, was I wanted to play Kyler, so I just pivoted to the Saints defense. And this ended up being my best lineup of the day. Most of my lineups all cashed towards the top, if not near the top of the tournaments. This was in the Millie Maker. So if we show all the lineups, and if I do a head-to-head on this particular lineup for someone who is in, say, hypothetically, let's say, first place, the first place lineup, Kamara. Now, Kamara had 2 rushing touchdowns from the 1-yard line. He had total of 15 rushing yards. So this is kind of also like, he got there. I was off of Kamara. I was off of Thomas. He got there. Most of his work, again, was in the passing. He had 83 receiving yards. Most of his work was in the passing game. But if you take those 2 touchdowns away, it's not a great play. And it's kind of like the same thing as with my Antonio Gibson calls. I kind of got lucky with those 2 touchdowns. The right play would have been to kind of spread it out and play a little J.D. McKissic in the scenario that they get behind. They may have to throw it to the pass catching back. But when I looked at the matchup against Detroit and pass catching back, I wasn't really somewhere that I wanted to target. So I played a variety of these 8 lineups over different contests. You'll see that they have Deontay Johnson. They had Deontay Johnson as a lone kind of one-off, which was, I think, a really, really smart play. You're playing it against a low-owned game. That Cincinnati-Pittsburgh game kind of broke the slate. You have DeAndre Swift at 6.5%, who did really, really well. I was not expecting him. Like I said, this whole game I had projected Washington playing from ahead, so I wasn't expecting Swift to kind of have the game that he had. He was playing very, very well. Jakeem Grant was someone I was kind of considering. I did not get to there because I wanted to play Mike Gesicki in one of the lineups. In the afternoon slate, I played Balaj. I know in the last video I said I wanted to play more Balaj. I kind of wish I did. And in my first video that I created, I wanted to play Ronald Jones. I kind of wish I got there too. But, sometimes it just doesn't work out. What my takeaway from this slate, it's always better to play more lineups than play in the higher dollar contest, because you kind of give yourself more chances, more outs to kind of succeed. If you're playing against someone who has a single entry versus your single entry, the feel is a little more fair. But if you're playing in a tournament with a Millie Maker, where someone's playing 150 lineups, they're gonna have an edge over you. It's just common sense. So third place, DJ Moore was someone I was on, but I didn't get there because I didn't like the Tom Brady. Tom Brady was the highest scoring quarterback on the slate, 34 points or something like that. But the problem was that you didn't have a specific receiver to stack him with. Everyone had a good game. Antonio Brown went for 13. Antonio Brown went for like 13. Gronk went for 13. I think Chris Godwin went for like 16. I know Mike Evans, I think, got into the end zone. So everyone had a decent game. Ronald Jones had that crazy 98-yard touchdown run. So it was kind of what I expected in that game. And the same thing kind of happened in Seattle and the Rams that I expected. With the Rams, I expected them to kind of go to Josh Reynolds, their deep threat. Josh Reynolds got the most targets out of anyone on that team. So at 3,500, I feel like that was a great play, low owned and high upside. But like I said, I think it could have been Malcolm Brown. You had Malcolm Brown who had a touchdown. You had Henderson who had touchdowns. You had Everett catching passes. You had Higbee catching passes. I'm not really sure how Cooper Kupp did. I think he had a quiet day along with Robert Woods. So that the heavy ownership on that game with that kind of stack was imperative on this slate, because I told you guys I like the Buffalo and Arizona game a little bit more, just because the offenses seem to be moving the ball well, and both offensive lines, the matchup for both offensive lines kind of was a little bit better than it was in the Rams game. In the Rams game, Rams defense was pretty good, and Seattle offensive line isn't that great. Rams running game isn't running defensive line isn't great, and Seattle could have run the ball. So it was many different ways that I could go. I think that game could have got. And this on this slate, like I said, the best thing to do is to target quarterbacks where you're gonna find a concentrated offense, where you know that it's going to one or two or three receivers. So that's why I felt like, okay, Beasley, I kind of knew where it was going. I didn't think that Josh Allen was going to take some deep shots, because Arizona is one of the top defenses against the deep ball. So I kind of knew it was going to be Diggs and Beasley. So let's take a look. This was the millionaire maker. Let's take a look at the 5 entry max. So in the 5 entry max, I did have 8 lineups. I kind of showed you guys all 8. I didn't play the 170 in this one. Highest one finished 93rd place. Kind of the same lineup with Gronk in here, Lockett, Mike Davis. And I think, it's something I'm going to start doing a little bit more, is kind of being a little more confident on your takes. The key is, when you're playing in tournaments, the projections don't matter. I mean, they matter until they don't, because you want correlated lineups that are going to give you the highest upside. You're sacrificing the projections for correlations, and you're kind of banking that your picks, 1 to 2 picks, the games that you pick are going to be the highest scoring on the slate. And if they are, you tend to do a lot better. I also, tend to do a lot better when chalk seems to bust. When, someone like Aaron Jones is 40% owned and he goes for 13 points and you're off that also gives you a huge leverage on the field. In this one, in the single entry contest, which is the $33 entry, you see that Mike Davis was 60% owned. Fading him in this tournament gives you a huge upside. So that's something to consider going into the next slate, going into this upcoming Sunday. And then lastly, I'll show you guys the $40 contest. This was the $40 contest. I'm not really sure how many entries I had in here. Okay, so I did have, so I kind of like whatever I could fit in each one. Again, same kind of deal here as I had Evan Ingram, Lockett. If I had just in this lineup decided I wanted to play Gronk, or if I wanted to play, Josh Allen double stack with Hopkins bring back, that was the nut play. That was the play to play, because all the other positions, like Miles Sanders didn't kill me. Antonio Gibson actually came through for me. The Saints defense actually did very well, which I'm kind of surprised by. I mean, I did expect them to do decent. I didn't expect them to get the 2 interceptions and the 2 fumble recoveries. So that's something that kind of worked out on this slate. We'll take a look at the scores and kind of just look at what, what happened. Like this game right here, Chubb had that 1 yard. He had one more shot at a second touchdown, and he just ran out of bounds. This game, I was completely wrong about too. There's takes that I'm going to be right on, and there's takes that I'm going to be wrong on. So I wasn't on Nick Chubb. I was off this game totally, but he ended up getting there. He ended up getting there, 126 yards, 1 touchdown. He could have had the second touchdown, but he stayed in bounds and decided to run the clock out. He could have been a smash play, and I think he was. I'm not sure if he was heavily owned or not, but it was a really good play. The Washington, you guys kind of know how that game went for me. The Packers, if you guys remember, I told you guys that the Packers, I believe in this game, were a 2-touchdown favorite, and I told you guys that this game might be significantly closer than I think it was going to be. I also told you guys that I liked James Robinson better than I liked Aaron Jones. And James Robinson did have over 100 yards, so he did not kill you at that $6,600 price tag. He actually had a fairly decent game. Eagles and the Giants, not to how I thought it was going to go. I thought even if the Eagles are playing from behind, Miles Sanders is going to get some touches. He only had 15 carries. So he did have a couple targets. I just thought he may have got a little more work. Now, maybe that's me overlooking Alshon Jeffrey coming back, Dallas Goedert being healthy. Maybe that's something that I need to kind of be a little bit more aware of and kind of see, maybe, take it with a grain of salt that, okay, he's coming back, and just kind of give myself a range of outcomes that if he does not go off for, 2 touchdowns over 100 yards, what is his floor in the scenario? And I think that's something that the projections are really good at. I think that if you're going, if you're subscribing to certain, different websites, Osmo.com has some really good projections. Roto Grinders has some really good tools. The websites that I like to use, I use a combination of all of them, but I really like PFF, Pro Football Focus, and I like FootballOutsiders.com. They give you a bunch of stats, and the way you become better is that you just go back to your past lineups, you learn from them, you kind of figure out what you did wrong, and you take a shot on the next slate. You got to keep a short memory, and you got to have bankroll management. You can't put all of your eggs into one basket or one slate. If you're playing with $1,000, spread that out throughout the season. Don't play all 1,000 on one slate. So just play to your budget, stay in your lane, and then scale up from there as you get better. Buccaneers really rolled, which was a good, a kind of a good bounce back spot. Broncos and the Raiders. I remember saying Drew Lock may be a little sneaky. Josh Jacobs had an amazing game, and that was my fear with playing Darren Waller. Is I knew that Raiders want to get Josh Jacobs the ball. He's rushing a ton. The matchup wasn't great against Denver, but somehow he still got there. 21 carries, 112 yards, and 2 touchdowns. An amazing game from him. That I'm just gonna eat that and kind of move on. I wasn't on Josh Jacobs. I did like Drew Lock a little bit, but I didn't get him into any of my lineups just because I felt that if they're not going to be able to run the ball against Oakland, Denver was getting stuffed, and if they're not moving the ball, if they're not able to run the ball, they're not going to be able to score. And then if you looked at all the past games, a majority of Drew Lock's points are coming in the fourth quarter. So if the Raiders are running the ball, they're running clock, and that gives Drew Lock less and less and less time to kind of, get a comeback or get more yardage. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I didn't play him. I did play Tim Patrick for the upside that maybe he catches a deep bomb, but he was only in one of my lineups. So this was a game I was kind of off, and Josh Jacobs ended up in the Million Maker lineup. He ended up on a lot of top teams lineup, which was, I think, really, really good. I told you guys I was interested in Kalen Ballage in the Chargers game. He actually did very well. He got the touches. He had a couple runs from the 1 yard line, just wasn't able to get into the end zone. I think if he had gotten into the end zone, I really would have regretted not playing him in all my lineups. Bills Cardinals, we know how that game went. I mean, that catch was just incredible. Great game, all around. Very exciting. Just Diggs comes back, he leaves 30 seconds on the clock. They think they won the game, and then Kyler, 45-yard bomb to Deandre Hopkins. An amazing game. So I'm glad that game lived up to the hype. Seahawks and the Rams. I don't know what's going on with the Seahawks right now. I mean, it feels like the defense are scoring on them at will, and it kind of it seems like Rams obviously spread the ball around, but it kind of seems like it's going to be tough for the Seahawks to win a Super Bowl if their defense is not playing like this. You can't expect Russell Wilson to go out there every single week against these tough defenses and drop 3 touchdowns, 300 yards. It's just not going to happen. Their running backs were also injured. I think I did mention DJ Dallas being a sneaky play. It was Alex Collins who actually got into the end zone. So I'm glad I didn't kind of mess with that backfield or go to this game as much as other people did. Like I said, I just wanted Tyler Lockett from this game and Josh Reynolds. San Francisco 49ers, we know that, Latavius had the carries. Kamara got there because he got the red zone work. So Kamara is a type of player where if he's still getting these catches, I feel like in the matchup upcoming this week, he's trending to be higher owned. I'm going to do an early look video about the Week 11 slate. But, you'll see that he's just getting there most in the passing game. And the 2 1-yard touchdowns kind of tilting because he wasn't having a great game. And again, same thing can be said for Antonio Gibson. He was not having a great game, but he ended up getting there. Steelers and the Bengals, I really don't know what's going on with Steelers running game. At this point, it's really hard to trust James Conner. I mean, Mike Tomlin came out and said that, they really want to try to focus on rushing the ball a little bit more. I think it was today. Today is Tuesday the 17th. So he came out and said that. So it makes me want to take a shot again at James Conner this upcoming weekend, but I'm a little hesitant just because it hasn't worked out so far. Ravens and the Patriots. I mean, we looked at this game. I think this game was not on the main slate, but this was the Sunday Night Football game. We thought Lamar Jackson is going to actually come out and kind of destroy the Patriots. I didn't do a showdown video for this, but, you know, the New England ran the ball actually very well against the Ravens. Lamar Jackson, with that weather, the comeback in the fourth quarter was going to be impossible. It was just, it was a big storm, and you could tell that Lamar's not really a great passer. He's more of a rushing. He is a rushing quarterback. So, all the upside was, he did throw for what 249 and two. I think one was to Willie Snead got both of them. So it kind of this kind of it didn't play out as I thought it would. I thought Ravens would kind of win this game. Same with the Vikings and the Bears. So the Bears, their defense was really good, and Dalvin Cook, I projected that he was going to get about 100 yards and a touchdown. He did not get the touchdown. They threw it from like the 3 or 4 yard line. Cousins got 2 touchdowns. And the really tilting thing was that, the Bears, Cordell Patterson came back and got a run back touchdown to open up the second half against his old team. So this kind of game script kind of went against my last video. Like the game script that I had predicted this game goes was that the Bears are going to play from behind, but they're going to play from behind the entire game. So, and one thing that I overlooked in this game is the Bears have no running back, right? Like, I thought, okay, if, David Montgomery's out, when you don't have a running back or if you're down wide receivers, one thing you want to take away from that is that it's going to make the other positions harder. So what the Vikings did is they were talking about it on Monday Night Football. They just, brought their safeties all the way back, and they just played deep coverage the entire game and forced the Bears to rush the ball. Nick Foles had a couple turnovers. I think Cousins had one that was picked off. So the defenses did very well. Dalvin Cook still got 30 carries, and this upcoming week he has a good matchup against Dallas, which I will get into in the next video. So, I think I might want to go right back to him. We'll see. But I hope you guys did well this past Sunday. Just you got to remember to play within your budget. Take the wins in stride, take the losses in stride, and continue to learn from every slate. The more you go back and look at stuff, the more you analyze, okay, how did you build versus how did they build, and how many entries did they enter, contest selection. It's really, really going to help you take your game to the next level. So good luck, guys. I will see you back here tomorrow. I'm going to do an early look video for the Week 11 slate, and I'll have another showdown video coming up for the Seattle-Arizona Thursday night game. All right, talk to you guys soon. Take care.